Today, we're tackling something that every ambitious business owner, thought leader, or professional with a strong personal brand thinks about, but few actually do. Building a movement around your brand. Not just a business, not just a service, but a movement, one that attracts a loyal following, commands attention, and creates a platform that grows way beyond what we could all build alone. And if you ever wonder how to go from I have a great idea to I have a brand people rally behind, this conversation is going to show you how. Welcome back to the Turbo Branding Show, where we help you ignite your growth by leveraging your brand to grow faster, easier, and more successfully. I'm your host, Sue Kirshner. My guest today, Dr. Matt Markel, he took a bold, contrarian idea, gave it a name, built a community around it, and turned it into a book and a podcast. So, Matt, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Sue, it's an absolute pleasure. This is the highlight of my day being on your show today.
I'm thrilled. Now I'm blushing. I think this is awesome. Well, excellent. Well, like I said, I am so excited to have you here today, share your experiences, your insights on building a meaningful brand, and everyone's going to want to hear about this movement that you are passionate about. But before we jump into that, let me tell my listeners a little bit more about you. So, Dr. Matt Markel is an engineer turned executive with 35 years of experience spanning defense, autonomy, and high-tech industries. He has served as CEO, CTO, and president of companies with revenues of 9 and 10 figures. But he began his career as an entry-level engineer. And that experience shaped his understanding of what it takes to grow, lead, and build wealth without sacrificing his career. He is the author of Anti-Preneur, Thrive in Your Career, Achieve Financial Success. It's a best-selling book and movement that helps professionals reach financial independence through smarter thinking, not burnout or hustle culture. So, like I said, I am fascinated by your passion to create this movement and thought leadership passion. So, let's start with your professional journey from entry-level engineer to C-suite executive to then pivoting to become a business advisor and then leading this movement.
So absolutely. So, when you think about after 35 years in this now, it's like, wow, that sounds like some sort of momentous thing. But I was thinking about it the other day about how I got to where I am. And it's really a tale of growing up in very, very modest roots in the Midwest. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, go Cards. And and
sure, coming from Illinois, I'll let you have that one.
Yeah, okay, yeah. It's we could spend the rest of the show on Cards versus Cubs, I guess, if we wanted to. But
exactly.
No, so started out, and basically we were incentivized in my family to be smart and to work hard. Those are the things that had value. There's also a fair amount of a scarcity mindset. I didn't know that at the time. We didn't really have that term at the time, that scarcity mindset. There was a lot of that going around, and it wasn't like we ever lacked for any, food or anything like that. But it was just like, oh, that's what the rich people have. And that was not us. And just that sort of mindset, work hard, be smart, and think about money from a finite standpoint, that kind of led into what I ended up doing. I ended up becoming an engineer. Why an engineer? They get paid well. It's a very low risk in the sense of like typically not going to lose your job. And it was a way to be smart as well. And I excelled at that, continued to get better at that. I got, a master's degree, and a little bit later, I had the opportunity to get my PhD in engineering. But all along this, financial, scarcity was there. I got divorced, and that cost me a whole lot of money. And to the point where I made the joke at one point, is like, well, I'm very set to retire about 6 years after I die. So that was just, the mindset at which I viewed things. Continued to grow in engineering and leadership and so forth. And then, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around. I started hanging around people that were much more in the entrepreneurial mindset and much more in the investment mindset. That changed my thinking on different things. The fluency, which I talked about engineering, they talked about money and deals and vetting deals and so forth. And I started thinking about the world like that. Pivoting my investment, taking back active control over my financial future, as opposed to saying to a financial advisor, well, I'm really good at my job. Why don't you be good at yours? And just here's my money.
Here's my money. Tell me what to do. Right.
Yeah. Here's my money, or just do it. I mean, don't even tell me, just do it. Now, he didn't do anything wrong or anything, unethical, but that's just a horrible way to go about things, is to basically abdicate your financial strategy, your financial, vision for the future. So, so I took that back, and really the thing that got all of this started to go from me to something bigger than me was, Sue, I was working in the last several things I've done in about the last 7 years or so have been like in startups of various sizes. The One of them was a startup I had brought a friend of mine in to work with me on. I ended up leaving that company, and the company, about a year later or so, they went under. They were suffering from some financial difficulties. They went under. So I was talking to my friend and I said, like, well, what are you going to do now? And he's in his 50s or so. So he's
Yeah.
like, well, I don't know, Matt, but I got to do something. We can't not work and have money.
Right.
And I thought about that. And so this guy was absolutely brilliant. I mean, I like to think I'm pretty smart.
Yeah.
I don't hold a candle to this guy. He is truly that level of brilliance.
Right.
And it got me thinking that how can somebody who is so absolutely brilliant at the science, technology, the engineering, the physics, all those sorts of things, how can someone who's so brilliant at that be so far off on their financial strategy?
Yeah.
And I think the more I thought about that, it's like it hadn't been incentivized. It hadn't been something we talk about. It hadn't been something that we talk about careers all the time. And you see that at the workplace. You see people advancing in their careers. You can
Right.
see the path that works. Because we don't talk about money, we basically are left to our own devices, or a bunch of junk that's out there on the internet of people primarily trying to sell you things, or
Yeah.
someone in the financial industry who's again trying to sell you something. So it was that individual that caused me to think like, well, I've done well, but that's because I've been connected to these other types of people that have showed me how to do well.
Right.
Maybe I can do that for others. Maybe I can do that for the professionals, the 93 million professionals that are out there in our workforce in our country today. And that's why I ended up, thinking about how to do this. And the term Anti-Preneur, which is the name of our brand, and I just happen to have a copy of the name of our book as well.
Yeah.
The that came about when one of my advisors, and they were talking about, we were riffing on different career strategies for me at some point after I had left one of the C-suite jobs and trying to figure out what to do next. And they were like, oh, you should just lean in hard into business advising and doing that. You're a great entrepreneur. And I was like, yeah, I don't really see myself as an entrepreneur that much. I see myself as a professional.
Yeah.
I'm happiest leading companies, happiest leading teams, developing products, getting those to cross the chasm in a Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm type sense.
Yeah.
And I said, like, I do the things that entrepreneurs do, and strategic with investing and money and so forth, but I'm kind of like an anti-preneur in the sense of the anti-hero, a hero,
Yep.
but you're doing things differently.
Differently, right? So it's interesting to me, having started my career at Motorola, surrounded by engineers, and having a little bit of a bias towards what did they know about branding and marketing and things like that. I think you have a really good sense of branding, especially personal branding. And we talked about this before we got on the podcast and things like that. So tell me a little bit about your personal brand, because it's so insightful that you talked about the fact that I know where I'm good. I know where I thrive and things like that. So tell me a little bit about your personal brand, because I think you mentioned once when we talked earlier that you have some, like, almost like a manifesto for business, or you have these 5 takeaways that you live up to. So,
Right. Right. I do have a manifesto that I basically use in my daily life, and it's about my brand. But I never sat down as an engineer and said, like, what are we going to do today? Well, let's work on our brand, because engineers don't think like that.
no.
We just think of like, how do we operate? So the closest thing for people in the tech industry or professional industry and so forth is like, don't think of this as a brand. Because when we think of brand, a lot of times it just throws people off.
Yep.
Those that aren't in the marketing side, it kind of throws them off. Think about it like, what's your operating system?
Hmm.
And for me, some of those key aspects of the operating system are, the first one is make the most out of every day. That is a lot of how my career transpired, is because I didn't become the president of a company just through my good looks. I became the president because I had experience as a vice president of another company before that. And I had experience get chosen to be a VP because I was the head of product for another company before that. I was head of a product that we were making. So basically everything in your career builds upon each day, right? It's
Yeah.
like interest in compounding. So that's a big part of what I espouse, like make the most out of every day. The people that will actually do that extra little thing at the end of the afternoon to get something done so that when they start tomorrow, they're starting on just a little bit farther along. That compounds so much over time. When you think of a 35, 15, 20, 25, 35, whatever year career, how
Right.
much doing a little bit more every single day can add is tremendous. So that's one of the principles. Another one of the principles, and I think this is kind of what you were getting at here,
Yeah.
is always be learning, always be growing. And that at no point in my career ever did I think like, all right, let's learn about digital marketing and branding and so forth. But it is one of those things, if you are going to try to influence other people and you are going to try to push others to change how they view a situation and change their behaviors on that,
Yeah.
that you have to be learning in the ways to do that. You have to learn the ways of motivation. You have to learn the ways of influence. You have to learn the ways of the mechanics of things. Learn how do we make a lead magnet? How do we make a funnel? How do we do a meta ad? All these sorts
Right.
of things that are the mechanics of it. But this concept of always be learning, that's part of being who I am. It's like, okay, I
Yeah.
need to learn this now. Excellent. That's an opportunity for me, not another task or a chore.
Right.
So
Yeah.
those are some of the key aspects of the manifesto. Another one is take advantage of big opportunities, always exceed expectations, make every exchange an abundant exchange where if we I expect you to do this and I'll do this, we'll each do our parts and then I'll go above and beyond. I'll make it an abundant and I'll add this to the deal also. So it feels like I've gone above and beyond. And the final aspect of the manifesto is never pass up an opportunity to be kind or to lift someone else up because that's just so important today, especially in this burgeoning age of AI.
Yeah.
The concept of human connection, humans helping humans out is so, so very important.
No, I love that. I love that. And the reason I wanted you to share that is because, what you're describing, it's your DNA, right? Your core values, whatever you want to call it, operating system, things like that. And I help organizations. There's a lot of them that have grown over time and they've never got to that point yet where they sit down and talk about what's their DNA, what's their core values, what's their culture, what's their passion, their why, and things like that. And it's important to identify that. And let's see if you agree, because what I like to tell my clients is, your business and how you deliver what your why is, your passion, your DNA, how you deliver it can change. You can pivot 100% and do it completely, do another industry and things like that. But the why you started your business, the way you behave as a business, how you treat people and things like that is your core. That is the identity of your organization. And I think that's also true for personal branding, isn't it? I mean, do you feel like you've had these core characteristics throughout your entire career?
The 5 aspects of the manifesto were not something that I came up with back in the year of our Lord, 1990, when I got my undergrad and started in my first job
Hmm.
out of school.
Right.
It's what I came up with for an interview. I was interviewed by the magazine that the fraternity that I was in while I was in undergrad. They interviewed, successful alumni, and I was one of the ones that they interviewed. And so I was like trying to think of like, well, what's the advice I would want to give to somebody who's a junior or senior in college today? What are
Hmm.
some of the, because I can't tell them, well, do these specific things in your career
Right.
because whatever I tell them, like if I told them, hey, when I started out, I used Fortran a lot as a programming language. Well, we don't do that so much anymore. But I can tell them these core principles, operating system, brand, whatever you want to call it. I can tell you well, these are the ones that I've used, and I can tell you that you should develop your own. But if you haven't developed your own, you can steal mine at least as a starting point.
Yeah.
And that's how I came up with them. So absolutely, it's important for people as well as it is for a business. For businesses, when they do that, and now tell me if this resonates with you. When they sit down to like write down all the stuff that they're going to do, how many times is like that's not really what they are. It's what they
Hmm.
think they might want to be. So
Right.
it's very aspirational, but there's a chasm, a huge chasm between how they're actually operating and what they think they are, what they want to be. And that
Right.
causes it comes across as being disingenuous. It comes across as, the successories posters on the wall that no
Yep.
one really, pays attention to. And it basically almost like devalues or discredits the
Totally.
leadership team because they're saying, oh, we're this. No, you're not.
No,
You're
you're
not
not.
at all. So
Absolutely. No, it breaks the key tenet of branding is to build a relationship and build trust with your customers. And when you start to be disingenuous, you're breaking all of that. You're breaking the trust, you're breaking the brand. There is no relationship. You just feel like you can't believe in what they're saying. So yeah, when I deal with some of my clients, it's like, yeah, they go right to the aspirational part. But then what I do is do the research with their customers, employees, and other stakeholders and say, you've said this, but they're saying this, and now we have this huge gap. And can we leap the gap? Can we figure out a way to change your behavior, change your customer experience, change your messaging? And it will not happen tomorrow, but can we move towards that? And if so, what are the stages of incremental change in your messaging and things? But otherwise, you can't just come out tomorrow and say, you know what, this is our aspiration. And so let's just start talking about that. And everything else will catch up. No, because you will ultimately upset too many people that will then not give you a second chance to prove your brand.
absolutely. One of the things they may do, and you might have seen this as well, is like they may find like, well, we said aspirational, we thought we wanted to be this, but it turns out what we really are is this, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. It's okay to do that because we're servicing a great, an important section of the population where, they like what we're doing. Maybe just embrace that. One of the car companies in the 1970s or 1980s, I think it was Avis, was like their slogan was like, we try harder. They were like the number 2 car company. And they were like, well, they can embrace that. Like, well, we're not number 1, but
Yeah.
we're number 2 and we try really hard and we've got something to prove. We're not going to just rest on our laurels. So it was like they embraced what they were.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. All right. So now let's jump into, because I do love the term entrepreneur. And I love it because I have another consultant friend who branded her target audience. And you kind of have done that here too. So she was a fellow podcast guest earlier, Parisa Benia, and she branded the people that she did executive coaching and leadership development for, which were these modern badasses. So instead of branding herself, she kind of branded who her target audience was, which opened doors for her, really helped her differentiate and stand out. Antipreneur, how is that different? Let's have you explain how is that different from being an entrepreneur? Because like you said, you do it differently. Or if I'm just an employee at a company, how do I become one of those?
Absolutely. So if you're an employee at a company, you are the exact target audience for being an entrepreneur, right? Because there's so much hype on the internet. You watch anything on social, Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn, whatever. There's all these things talking about like how great it is to be an entrepreneur. Start a business, make $10,000 in your pajamas, and there's tons of people out there that are selling you their programs for $10,000 probably from their pajamas to help you do that.
Yeah.
For most people, that is an absolutely horrible mistake and probably, or at least possibly, an irrecoverable financial mistake to leave your job and to start something like that.
Right.
In addition to the risk of that, it's a bad idea from an identity standpoint too, because if you're a professional, the group I call professionals, practitioners, and experts, right? If you're a professional at something, could be an engineer, could be someone in marketing, could be someone in supply chain or a chef or whatever. If you're a professional, you get a lot of joy and a lot of validation from what you do. It's kind of part of your DNA. It's not the
Absolutely.
entirety of your identity, but it's a certain part of it, right? And if you take that away, then that's like losing a part of yourself. There's someone who's a very successful investor, author, Cody Sanchez. He wrote a book. I actually read her book, good, called Mainstream Millionaire, and she talks about how to be an entrepreneur and do things like sell her own financing. So she's like, laundromats were one of the things that she did in the beginning. So she was buying laundromats and running laundromats and so forth. And you take an engineer or someone who's really good at marketing or someone who's really good at supply chain or a chef or whatever. It's like, hey, your new job is to run this laundromat. Then they're going to be like, no, I'm not getting out of bed for that. That doesn't appeal to me at all. So it's an identity thing. So the Anti-Preneur is a professional practitioner or expert. That's what this group that we're talking to, either with or working towards financial independence. And financial independence means that you've got a net worth or a portfolio that's large enough that can throw off enough cash to cover all your expenses. So when
Yeah.
you hit that point, when your portfolio pays for all your expenses, then you're financially independent. It's a twist on Robert Kiyosaki's financial freedom term that he
Freedom.
talks about. It's either in Cash Flow Quadrant or in Rich Dad Poor Dad, but it's a kind of a twist on that. It's the idea of like when you've built your portfolio big enough that you are financially independent. It means it can throw off enough cash to cover all your expenses. Then you don't have to work. You work because you want to, and that's extremely freeing. So an entrepreneur is someone who's on that journey.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So tell me a little bit more about how you're expanding this movement, right? Because I love the passion behind it, and you've got the book and you've done the TEDx talk and you've talked a little bit about, building this community, but what is your vision for the movement and how do you inspire others to join because they're going to help spread the message and get it out to more people?
Right. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build the tools, the strategy, and the community so that professionals can thrive in their career and achieve financial success. And we can eliminate the fear and uncertainty associated with money. That's really what we're trying to do. And the things that we built out so far are the book. You mentioned the Anti-Preneur book that's available on Amazon. That lays out the groundwork for everything. It lays out the why we need to do this. It talks a little bit about some of the statistics on why this is so important. Like there are 93 million professionals in our country today. So it's a big group of the population. The fact that we have a $7 trillion shortfall in retirement savings in our country, 7 trillion with a T. That's more, by the way, than the federal government spent in 2024. I need to look up the 2025 numbers, but it's more than what the
Or,
US federal government spent in 2024. So, just a
wow.
ridiculously huge amount.
Yeah.
And the fact that 2 out of 3 families today live paycheck to paycheck. And it's not just the low income earners. 1 out of 3 households is living paycheck to paycheck that makes over $200,000 a year. Let me say that again. 1 out of 3 households making over $200,000 a year lives paycheck to paycheck. And that's just, why is that?
Mind-boggling, right?
It's
Yeah.
mind-boggling. It's
Yeah.
absolutely unthinkable. And there's several reasons why. We can talk about those in a second. But the book lays it out. The podcast is bringing on professionals or those that can help professionals. I brought people from the finance industry, people that understand a lot about business strategy, not to start your own business, but to help you excel in the portions of the business that you run, whether you're a director or product owner or whatever. We brought in people that are in the HR field to talk about, hey, this is what things that you can do to help get ahead in your career from an HR standpoint, not as an HR professional necessarily, although there's definitely some tips on that, but also from like, hey, these are what managers look for. And I
Yeah.
brought on a lot of people that are absolutely fantastic at communication, at networking. So if you think about all the skills that professionals really want, we're having all of those types of people on our show. And that's called Thrive and Achieve. That's available on Apple, Spotify, and on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
And then there's the community on School, the SKOOL platform. The Oxymosi is a big sponsor of that.
Okay.
And, so we built a community on that. And again, since I'm realistically less interested in making money off of this, at least initially, than I am about helping this group
Yeah.
and helping to grow this movement, I put videos on every single aspect of the program that we talk about in the book. All the entire Kickstart program, I put how-to videos on that, and they're all for free. Every single thing on that portion of the school community is free. There's about $1 a day program, which has access to sessions with me, live sessions that I teach.
Okay.
And then there's like if you want to private sessions with me, that's a higher price point as well.
Yeah.
But if you just want to watch the videos of every single thing I talk about, career strategies, financial strategies, the difference between MOIC and IRR, how to unstick your career, all those sorts of things, those are all for free on the school community. You guys sign up for a free account and then join the Anti-Preneurs on the school community. And those are the ways that we're initially rolling out the building of this movement via the building of this brand.
Okay. All right. No, again, I love it because you're coming at all of this from, a sense of service, right? Which is why it's kind of a mission to help change the perception that's out there. And we talked about this. It's like, granted, I'm not even going to say how long ago it was when I started working and things like that. No, no one ever told you about how to manage your money effectively as an employee, things like that. I mean, you barely got, sign up for the 401k plan. And if you need cash at the beginning when you're just starting your job, keep it at the lowest level possible because you're going to need more cash to buy a car, your rent, all this kind of stuff. But then no one ever comes back and says, okay, now that you have some money, let's maximize it and move it forward. And you're right. And we've been told all these glamorous stories of, the only way to make, legacy type wealth or, extreme success financially is, yeah, you have to own your own business or you have to be a killer salesperson. Nobody ever says like, hey, you can just work really nicely and have a great career within an organization and you can still make a lot of money as long as you're intentional about it. You don't have to have a business, and as you talked about. But where do you think or let me say this, do you get any pushback from either anyone in the industry who was like, wait, why are you giving all this stuff away for free? Or no, it's not necessary. Or do you find that people still are just so afraid to talk about money? Because like you were saying, money to a lot of people is taboo.
Let's answer those in reverse order.
Okay.
Money is still taboo. It's the final taboo topic in the workplace. You can talk about mental health, depression, gender identity, also, substance abuse, all those sorts of things are now okay to talk about in the workplace, but you can't talk about money. And if they do talk about money, it's once a year during your performance review, and that's one-on-one with your manager, or it's in the beginning when you sign up for like, hey, here are the 5 mutual funds you can pick from for your 401k or Roth, and you pick some version of these 5 and how much you're going to put in, whether it's going to be in a Roth or not, or a 401k or some mix of the two. That's the only times we talk about money.
Yeah,
But that's where the workplace is where we spend most of our time.
absolutely.
And one of the things we talked about a lot in the TEDx talk I did was if we can change that model, if we can have people explain how I'm not giving you financial advice, but I'm telling you what I did. I'm not going to get crosswise with, FINRA or SEC, but I can tell you what I did. And I did these sorts of things. And I can tell you what most of the people that are at my level value. And we value things like liquidity, and we value things like diversification, and we value things like a portfolio that's balanced across speculative and growth and revenue producing or income producing and very safe and secure funds. And those are the types of things that we are looking at, that we're valuing. So there's pushback on it, and it's always tough to get people to talk about money just themselves because they've been ingrained in that. But the people that have found it to be very, very useful, very, very beneficial to say like, okay, well, I'm doing this. I thought I should do this. I didn't know about that. Whatever the different things that they're bringing up are with the private clients that I've had, it's very, very helpful for them. And most of the times they'll also say things like, my financial advisor never taught me that. My financial advisor never did this. I didn't know that you could take your IRA and invest it in something other than mutual funds through a self-directed. All those different things that, that industry, which is I'm in general not a huge fan of, hasn't served them with. So that's kind of the latter part of the question. The earlier one, like, why are you giving stuff away for free? Yeah, everybody has an opinion on the pricing model that you're going to use, right? Every single person, like belly buttons, everybody's got an opinion on what the pricing model should be. And I was like, well, this is what I'm doing, and if it helps people, if it helps more people, then fine. We'll monetize this. I have no doubt that this is, that we'll make this the success that it needs to be. But right now, it's more about helping people and getting the message out.
Right. And like you said, this was something that, again, because I was not raised where we talked about money and things like that, one of the things that I had to learn as a business owner was this whole fear, like sometimes you feel almost like, oh, I can't make too much money. And maybe that's a female thing, right? It's like, oh, I shouldn't always be talking about chasing money or maybe I shouldn't charge that much and things like that. But it took me a while to get to the point where I realized that, having that income, having that wealth and charging and monetizing what you're doing, it allows you to actually then reach more people. And I would see with yours, with what you're doing, you're going to grow to a certain extent. And it's amazing that you're giving away so much expertise right now for free. But there's going to come a point where you're like, you know what? We could have a bigger impact in this world if we could just extend our message a little bit further. And that might take money. And so there's some, going back to your core values and things like that, there's some joy to be had in saying, yes, I need a certain amount of money because that's what's going to allow me to leverage my mission forward.
Yeah, just to be clear, we haven't operated on like a zero budget. And this company has a really good looking benefactor who's been footing the bill for all this. And
Nice, nice. Excellent, excellent. All right. Well, let me ask you in the time that we have left here is how, again, because you're using your brand, your personal brand is kind of the validation behind the movement, but how are you going to leverage and build the brand more as you go forward? So I know, you had the book. I don't know if you have other books planned, but if there was someone, like you is like, oh, I have a platform, or I think I have a platform, what kind of model or advice would you give them on how to start getting that message out as fast and as succinctly as possible?
so there's a message for monetization and there's a message for thought leadership, right? And I think those are similar, but they're not always the same thing.
Right.
So messages for monetization typically take one sort of path on social media. Messages for thought leadership, those take a different path. So most of my personal writing has been on platforms like LinkedIn, where you have professionals reading it and professionals looking at it. If you're looking to monetize things or to grow a CRM, the meta platforms and so forth are typically a little bit better for that. But you have to look at like if you're doing a funnel on a meta platform, you might get a large group of people that buy into that, but the number that will convert or that can convert is going to be much less. That's why when I do put things on that platform, I focus specifically on things that are going to really narrow down to a small subset of people. Like if you are, and not to be disparaging, if you're working at a Starbucks or something like that, you're probably going to be less interested in my 35-page deal vetting framework, which is one of the things that we use as a magnet on our meta platforms. But if you're someone who's, a senior director, manager, whatever, who's starting to think about maybe I should diversify out of my 401k a little bit, then they're like, yeah, how to vet a deal. I don't know anything about vetting a deal. Well, I can get this book for free or this guide for free.
Yeah.
It's written by this guy who's but a CEO and a CTO, and all these other things and a successful investor. Yeah, I'll do that. And that person is much more tied to the target audience. For the thought leadership side, I write on LinkedIn because that's where most of my audience lives. And the way to kind of get started in that is A, you have to start, B, you have to always think about how can you add value. Again, back to my manifesto. If you're putting back there, some of the first LinkedIn things I wrote were absolutely terrible. It was like a picture with a quote and, and I was like, they're actually good pictures. I'm a photographer as well. And I took, they're like some really great pictures I'd taken with some quote on something.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, those just don't do well at all. But when you start putting out there things that are adding value to people, I've written about how to overcome the Sunday scaries, the anxiety that presents before the start of a work week for many people. I've written on the correlation between sugar intake. This is a little bit off topic for my audiences, but it helps them. The correlation between sugar intake and especially things like high fructose corn syrup, fructose, and dementia. And those have done very well. I wrote one recently on that is basically going viral right now on comparing what we're seeing now with the headlines of AI is going to take everyone's job, right? That's what there's a lot of people, everyone's going to lose their job to AI. Well, this is not the first time we've heard that song, right? That chorus has been sung with the robots a decade ago, ATMs in the 1980s,
Right.
the Cyber Nation in a memo to President Johnson, I believe, in the 60s. And, all these sort of, as far back, I went back to 1928 and found example headlines, example stories of that. So the narrative is very similar. And the hook on that was like, each generation thinks their technology is going to be the one that ends all jobs, or something like that. So writing on LinkedIn is the way to reach those types of people. And you can put the thought leadership out there and get substantial interaction and debate and so forth going with that. And that's a good way to help build your brand. And you don't need anything to do that other than a free LinkedIn account and a computer,
Right.
And the thoughts that you want to put out there.
The thoughts
I would
are the
recommend
brand
that.
view. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I would recommend that if you do that, engage with some folks right away that are maybe at a similar stage as you, so you can help support each other's posts, comment, share, repost, whatever on that, because that just helps things go faster when you have a little bit of you kind of jumpstart your audience a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. Those are all excellent examples of how to get started, how to get followers and people to understand your mission and help you promote it as brand ambassadors, so to speak. So, I've got two more questions for you here. One is I want to take this and now let's flip it and talk about I'm someone who works at a company. I might be in marketing. I'm listening to everything you're saying about this anti-preneur. I want to learn more about money. What's the first step? Is it you know, going to your site and getting educated on, wealth topics and things like that? Or would you advise someone to work on your mindset first, like figuring out what do I want in life before jumping into being educated on the tactical part?
So, what if the answer was both? And if you go to the school community or read in the book, the very first section on that, I'm being a little bit, humorous right now, but like
Yeah.
the first section of that is on mindset. It
Mm.
is on defining what success means for you. It is understanding how do you think about money today? If money is something that's unobtainable, you probably won't obtain it. If money is something that is the end goal, you're never going to be satisfied because you can never have it until you have all of it, which is impossible. And even if
Impossible.
you had all of it, then it wouldn't be worth anything because you'd be the only one that had it.
Right.
So it would be so scarce that it's of no value.
Right.
So the defining success, understanding the mindset, those are the absolutely critical things, and it's so important to start with that. I wrote and I can send the link for you and your viewers. I wrote basically a whole guide on how to define success for you.
Hmm.
And it's based on some work I had done over the last 5 years or so. And when people think of success, they think of it a lot of times as very achievement based. Like as soon as I become the manager, or as soon as I start making six figures a year, or
Right.
150 grand or 200 grand or whatever. And every time it's achievement based, I'm all about setting goals and so forth. And I think goals are very, very important. But if that's
Right.
how you define success, you'll never be happy. Because as soon as you get close to achieving that, you'll want the next thing, right? If you make, if your business made 500,000 top line last year, you're going to want to do 1 million top line this next year, right? You're not going to be happy if you're a good entrepreneur or a good professional. You're not going to be happy at what you just did last year because then you're with inflation, you're falling behind, and no one wants to fall behind. So if you did 500,000 last year, you're going to want to do 1 million. You do 1 million this year, you're going to want to do 2 million top line next year.
Yeah.
So you'll never be happy with that. So it's all about defining success in a way that is related to the life that you want to be living. How do you want to live that life? And you paint a very, very detailed picture of that in
Hmm.
your mind. And I actually have several exercises where people can go through and work through, like, what do you want to eat? Do you want to get up with an alarm clock? Do you want to live in the current house that you're in? Do you want to have another house?
Right.
Do you eat more salads? Do you never eat another dang salad in your life? Whatever it is,
Right.
defining that success for you is very, very important. So yes, you absolutely have to start with the mindset aspect of that. In terms of like the one takeaway though, if you wanted to do thing,
Yeah.
one thing, if you want to spend $0, join the school community. It gets you all the videos and so forth. It's completely free. If you want to spend $10 or $15, buy the book on Amazon, and it's digital for 10 or 9.99 or something like that. And then I think
Yeah.
the paperback is 15, and read the book and then join the school community. And you'll be well on your way because you'll be start learning. And then when you're in the school community, just DM me, and we'll set up a chance to talk. I'll hear what you're doing, hear how to help you. If there's other resources I can provide, I'll hook you up with the right people for that. And that's probably the best way. If you're looking for fun things to do and you like podcasts, obviously listen to Sue's show, the Turbo Branding, but also listen to Thrive and Achieve also, because it's a
Right.
lot of good insight from some real experts in the community.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I have one more question for you, but I just wanted to say thank you for sharing all that information about A, branding and being a business owner, B, your journey and how you got there, and then C, some advice for those who want to learn a little bit more about how to think about money a little bit differently and maybe reach some financial goals that didn't seem possible before. So, but what I wanted to ask you is one final question because I love to give a shout out to small and mid-sized businesses who are just doing a fantastic job of branding to give them examples to aspire to more than just the big Coca-Colas and Mercedes and things like that. I would ask you if you could nominate a business that you think does a great job branding.
So one of the ones that I have a lot of personal experience with here in the North Dallas area is Waters Creek Village. It's a shopping center in Allen, Texas, and it's a beautiful center. There's a creek running through it. They have a big sort of amphitheater, what they call the green, with a stage and a lawn. People, sit at that. They have concerts. Shoot, I think the concerts go on for like every Saturday night for 7 months out of the year.
Hmm.
There's always an event there. There's actually one today. It's spring break here this week, and for many schools in North Dallas. And they have a big spring break pop-up party today that they're doing there. It's just a fantastic place. They have great coffee shops, they have great restaurants, shopping,
Yeah.
and it's approachable, but it's not, I don't want to say high end, but it's got the level, this feeling of quality in a very approachable setting. They do a lot of things that bring in other aspects of the community, everything from art festivals to wine walks to Oktoberfest type things in the fall. Really a way to not only bring more traffic and more insight to all the centers there, because ultimately for a shopping center, sales per square foot, is the metric that they look at, but do so in a way that everybody says, like, that's the place that I want to be. I want to be seen at Waters Creek Village.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, like you said, it's building a place where the community can come together and have a joyous experience. That's just an amazing brand attribute. So thank you for nominating them. I really appreciate that. So,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
again, Matt, thank you so much for spending time with me today and sharing your journey and especially your passion for this anti-preneur movement. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I'm going to ask you to say it again. If any of the listeners would like to learn more about you or grab the book or, get involved with the community, where should they go to find this?
So the website that has a lot of everything on it is antipreneur.com, anti-preneur, anti-preneur.com. And then if you look for the school community, the Anti-Preneurs, just go to school, skool.com. You can find it there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Matt Markel, and follow me on LinkedIn. Put a ton of what I think is really good stuff out there, and basically how to thrive in your career and achieve financial success.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure, Sue. Thank you so much.
Before you go, I want to leave you with an exercise to identify your own key principles or tenets that guide you in the way that you show up in business. Dr. Markel talked about his 5 principle operating system, and not as a formal branding exercise, but as a reflection of how he actually lives and leads. He even called it his business manifesto. Your challenge this week is to do the same because these principles form the foundation for a strong personal brand. And a strong personal brand helps you stand out from others, whether you're competing as a business owner or as a professional looking for a new position, maybe. So set a timer for 20 minutes and answer these 3 questions. First, how do you show up? Think about the consistent behaviors people would observe in you, at work, with clients, and especially in how you handle tough moments. Second, what do you believe that most people in your industry don't? This is where your contrarian edge lives, and it differentiates you so you attract opportunities that others may not. Finally, what would you tell a younger version of yourself entering your field? Often your core principles are buried in the advice you give others, so treat yourself as a stranger needing guidance. From your answers, pull out 3 to 5 phrases or principles that feel true, not aspirational and not what you wish were true. As Dr. Markle put it, don't write a successories poster. Those posters in the offices that have inspirational quotes on them. Write what's actually programmed into your operating system and how you show up to work and lead. Because the more you know your strengths and values, the easier it is to tell your brand story and why you're the perfect person to work with. Once you have these principles, start using them in how you talk about yourself in your LinkedIn profile or professional bio, or even a personal website if you have one, and see what new opportunities your messaging attracts. And thank all of you for joining us for this episode of the Turbo Branding Show. I hope you've been inspired to ignite your growth by leveraging your brand. And if you enjoyed it, I'd love it if you could help me build a strong brand following for this show. Please share this episode and be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. Thank you, and stay tuned for our next episode.